9 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Is there any updates to the agenda?
Good morning, Council. There is a request to delete 2 items from today's agenda that require a resolution. I would suggest that we deal with them one at a time. The first one is to remove agenda item D2, which is the expropriation of lands for Bride Creek Flood Mitigation Project. Administration has reached an agreement for the purchase of the lands outstanding for the Bride Creek project. So this matter no longer needs to be considered by Council, and Mr. Andresen has prepared a motion for your consideration.
Good. Thank you. Could we get a motion to delete item D2? Councillor who we got? Councillor Wright. Maybe let Councillor Kamachi. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Kamachi.
The agenda amendment that the June 11th, 2019 council meeting agenda be amended as follows. Remove item D2, expropriation of lands for Bride Creek Flood Mitigation Project.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I have one more. Agenda item D5, this is the development permit for the compost facility. The applicant has requested that this item be removed from the agenda and rescheduled to another time to allow further time to review consultant reports.
Deputy Reeve Schul.
I was just going to make a motion to approve the agenda with the amendment of deleting D2.
Okay, seeing no further discussion. All in favor? That is carried. And confirmation of minutes from May 28th council meeting. Councillor Gautreau.
Thank you. I'd like to approve the May 28th, 2019 council minutes.
All in favor? That too is carried. And we have an appointment this morning, Mr. Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Council. My name is Grant Kaiser with Rockview County. Council, as you know, you use a wide range of knowledge, experience, and community awareness in your governance decisions for Rockview County. And today, as part of giving you some economic background information that you may find valuable in your work, we're receiving a presentation from Todd Hirsch, the Chief Economist and Vice President for ATB Financial. Mr. Hirsch holds degrees in economics from the universities of Alberta and Calgary, and before joining ATB, he worked as an economist in numerous organizations, such as the Canadian Pacific Railway, the Canada West Foundation, and the Bank of Canada. He's the author of 3 well-known books, including The Boiling Frog Dilemma, Saving Canada from Economic Decline, and Spiders in Space, Successfully Adapting to Unwanted Change. Todd Hirsch is a highly sought-after speaker, and I know you'll find his presentation worthwhile. Mr. Hirsch.
Well, thank you very much, Grant, for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me and allowing some time for me to give some of my thoughts with what's going on in Alberta's economy. It's an honor to be with you this morning. The title of my presentation, Alberta Economy 2019, One Thing That Matters a Little, and 5 Things That Matter a Lot. Now let's talk about the one thing that I think matters a little, first of all, and we'll get that one out of the way. And in order to do that, I always like to think in metaphor and in story. So here's my metaphor. Now imagine if you brought a young child who was not feeling well to the doctor, and you asked the doctor to check out the child. If the only thing the doctor did was measure your child's height and told you, well, your child has grown 2 centimeters since the last checkup, everything is fine, off you go. You might say to the doctor, well, couldn't you give me any more information about the health of my child? Then if the doctor said, well, how about we measure your child in centimeters and in inches? Is that more complete information? Again, you might say to the doctor, well, don't you want to listen to her heart rate or do some blood test, look in her eyes or her ears? Measuring the height of the child is good. I mean, it's nice to see the child growing taller, but it doesn't give us very much information about the health of the child. And in the same way, economists, we spend a lot of time talking about one thing that's really just measuring the height of the child, and that is our forecast for the GDP growth rate. So here it is, our forecast at ATB Financial, 2019, a whopping 0.7%. Now, at this point, we're really quibbling over tenths of percentage points if we're going to have any growth in Alberta this year at all. And that is really tough news for me to deliver. I spend most of my job traveling around the province, giving this presentation and others, and there is a level of discouragement, there's no doubt, about the weak level of growth we're seeing in 2019. And it's especially disheartening because after the recession in 2015 and 2016, which now is, almost 4 years behind us, 2 years of decline, then 2017 there was a little bit of a lift. There was some growth that year, and Albertans were starting to feel like, all right, we've turned the corner. And then 2018 and now halfway through 2019, growth has completely stalled out in Alberta for reasons that I'll get to in the 5 big things that matter. So it is a discouraging growth forecast. The problem with 0.7% is that the growth rate is so weak, it's not really creating enough new jobs. And that is where Albertans tend to really connect with the economy in a personal way. The unemployment rate still hovering close to 7%, higher than that in the Calgary region, I would note. That is an unacceptably high rate of unemployment. We are expecting growth to pick up in 2020, but job creation is going to be gradual, and that is something that, if we like it or not, we'll have to prepare ourselves for in Alberta, having higher than average unemployment. But even though that does matter a little bit, the rate of growth of the GDP, it actually doesn't matter very much because it doesn't tell us very much about the health of the economy. It's the same way with measuring the height of the child. So very weak growth, but what are the 5 big themes that matter? Well, before we get there, I always think every presentation should have one quote from Oscar Wilde. So here's mine. Whenever people agree with me, I always feel I must be wrong. And I love the humor in this quote because what it does is it gives us permission as humans to disagree with each other and have different perspectives and to debate and to see the world in different ways. As long as it's done respectfully, I'm under no impression that everyone is going to agree with me all the time. These 5 themes that I want to touch on that I think matter much more to Alberta's economy. Not for a minute do I believe everyone is going to agree with me on the themes. And even if we agree on the theme, where we may see some disagreement is on what precisely we should do about that as a province moving forward. So what are the 5 themes that matter much more? Well, number 1, obvious, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and in a more general sense, pipeline transportation access for our hydrocarbons to the markets where people want to buy them. Now, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, as we're all aware, this has become the poster child, so to speak, for all of these transportation projects and these pipeline projects. It is the one that is at the center of a lot of political debate and a lot of controversy. And over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen our share of drama on the Trans Mountain Pipeline, with the governments of Alberta and British Columbia at loggerheads with this project, with the federal government purchasing a year ago, right around now, purchasing the assets from Kinder Morgan. And now we're all waiting on pins and needles for June 18, the day that the federal government has given itself the deadline to make a decision one way or the other if Trans Mountain is going to proceed or not. Now, I don't know. I would love to be a fly on the wall in these federal cabinet meetings. I have no inside information any more than anybody else does what the federal government may or may not announce on June 18. I think if the answer is yes, it's full steam ahead, the project may proceed, I actually think that will go some distance in raising some optimism and maybe loosening the purse strings on some of that capital in the energy sector that's been sitting on the sideline waiting for greater assurance that at least some pipeline projects are going ahead. Because I think there is a hesitancy, and there has been. That's really what's led to the flatness in the provincial economy and the energy sector particularly. There's been a hesitancy to spend on capital projects and investment in the energy sector until we have greater assurance that pipeline projects are going ahead. So if the answer is yes on June 18, I think I might actually even raise my growth forecast moderately. However, if the answer is no, or not yet, or more delays, or more blocks, I don't know. I, for one, am not looking forward to a summer of increasing frustration and anger in this province and in this city. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But even if we agree that moving our hydrocarbons by pipeline is perhaps the most traditional and maybe the most efficient way to do it, it's not the only option we have. There are some alternatives. This project here, you might be aware of, CN Rail putting forward this project called Canapux. The basic idea here is that bitumen is encapsulated in what amounts to a margarine container, or a recycled polymer container. You load these square pucks onto an open-top gondola car, a rail gondola car. You rail them off to the port of Prince Rupert, where these pucks would be loaded onto a freight container, not an oil tanker at sea. This is a really important distinction. Now, what CN Rail thinks it can possibly do with this project is load and transport bitumen as a bulk commodity, the same way you would load coal or grain. Not using oil tankers, rail oil tankers, or oil tankers at sea. Now this gets around a lot of the environmental sensitivities, a lot of the anxiety of oil tanker derailment or spills on open ocean, which has been a lot of the focus of the opposition towards moving bitumen and moving bitumen on open sea. If we're able to move it as a bulk commodity, it sort of gets around a lot of that environmental anxiety. Now, I don't know if this project is feasible. I'm not here to sell stock in CN Rail. I guess that's up to CN Rail to do. But what I like about this project, or about the idea anyway, is that to me it represents a creative, innovative solution, possible solution, to a very difficult challenge we have in this province, and that is, how are we going to move our hydrocarbons moving forward in a world, if we like it or not, that has become very hostile towards traditional pipelines. I believe that we need to very strongly make the case for pipelines, for Canadian energy. This is Canada's energy industry. I don't think for a minute we should back down. I think we should make those arguments forcefully. But we also have to be aware that these projects, these pipelines might not go ahead. And we owe it to ourselves and our industry to have some plan B and plan C and plan D in place if in fact we don't see any more pipeline construction. This represents at least one creative solution. And where there is one creative idea, there are bound to be more. So that's the first theme that I wanted to touch on, things that matter. Pipelines, or more generally, how are we going to move our hydrocarbon resources in a world that is increasingly hostile towards traditional pipelines. The second theme affecting Alberta's economy this year and going forward is, how do we diversify our economy? Now, I'm assuming a lot of us in this room, myself and probably a lot of you, have lived your entire lives in Alberta, and if you have, you would likely agree that this question never really goes away. This question about how do we create more diversity in our economy, this has been around at least since Peter Lougheed days. And governments and policy wonks and economists have tried at different points, different ideas and suggestions to try to diversify the economy, all with pretty mediocre impact. In 2019, we find ourselves with an economy that is still very beholden to the energy sector. So the question is, shouldn't we do more to diversify? Well, I think the better question is, who is the we in that statement? Shouldn't we do more? Whose responsibility is it, really, to diversify the economy? Is it the provincial government's responsibility? Is it local economic development offices? Is it chambers of commerce? Is it ATB Financial? I would suggest all of those groups would have a role to play in diversifying the economy, but it's hard to pin down and say it's any one group's responsibility. I think economic diversification, if it's going to be lasting, would happen organically. And the good news is, in 2019, I actually am seeing a lot of green shoots of organic diversification in the province. The challenge is that diversifying a province does not happen overnight. And even with the green shoots of diversity, this is going to be a 20 or possibly 30-year process in diversifying. Not moving away from our energy industry, of course, but rather adding to our energy industry in more diverse sectors. The 4 sectors where I'm seeing a lot of green shoots of opportunity, and it's not that they're all new because many of them have been around a very long time, but there's 4 that I'll mention briefly. Number 1, agriculture and agri-foods. And I always joke as I travel around the province, you know, no self-respecting farmer in the room would let me out of the room alive if I suggested agriculture was new, like we just discovered it. Of course, farming has been around this province far longer than the energy industry. But where we are seeing some really encouraging diversity in agriculture and agri-foods is in some of the niche crops, some of the organic crops, crops like cannabis, things in food and beverage processing and manufacturing. A lot of it is at the small scale, to be sure. Even just look at all the craft breweries that we're seeing cropping up around the province. So it's not that a lot of it needs to be at a massive scale. Some of it is, like the vegetable processors down around Lethbridge. A lot of it, however, is at a small scale, but we are seeing a lot of activity in agriculture and agri-foods and more diversity. The second sector where we're seeing a lot of diversity or growth, tourism. Now the challenge, I suppose, provincially when you talk about tourism, it does not touch every region of the province in the same way. It does tend to be very concentrated in the Calgary, Canmore, Banff corridor and to some degree the Edmonton-Calgary corridor. Nonetheless, tourism has been growing near double digits over the last 4 or 5 years, and I think a lot of potential to grow further. The third sector of diversity, the tech sector. Now, I get asked a lot of the time, come on, Todd, is this tech sector everyone talks about, is this real? Or is it just kind of imaginary? We like to think we have this, but you know, where's the evidence for this? Well, I do think the tech sector is real. The challenge with it is, I describe the tech sector in Alberta as being 1,000 pinpoints of light. In other words, you don't need to look very far in any part of the province to find a tech company doing some pretty remarkable stuff. What we're lacking so far is a geographic concentration of it, or in the language of economists, a cluster. Not like they would have in Waterloo, Ontario, or Vancouver, Austin, Texas, where you see these clusters of the tech sector. But we have to remember those cities, they grew their tech sector over the last 30 years. It didn't happen overnight either. And in Alberta, I think we are along the path of growing a diversified tech industry. It will be a unique tech sector, not like Waterloo's or Vancouver's. Our tech sector, I think, will focus on providing solutions to our traditional industries, like energy and agriculture. But again, it is going to be a 20 or 30-year growing process. And number 4, oops, what's happened? Number 4 in terms of, did I do that somehow? Number 4 in terms of the sectors where I'm seeing diversity is transportation and warehousing, or what we now call logistics. Now, logistics is a much more technologically sophisticated industry than it was in the 20th century, and one where I think we are seeing a lot of opportunities, again, right around here, the Edmonton, Calgary, Airdrie corridor, Rocky View County. A lot of opportunities, I think, for further growth there. However, even if we are seeing diversity, there are some, what I describe, old-fashioned ways of thinking about Alberta's economy. Ways of thinking that belong in the 20th century. We need to adopt 21st century ways of thinking. In the 20th century, at least back when I was studying economics at the U of A in the 1980s, growing and diversifying Alberta's economy, it really came down to 2 things. Just do, more oil and gas, more cows and canola, just keep doing all of that. And that model actually worked pretty well for a long time. We're twice the size of economy and population in this province as we were in the 1980s. But in the 21st century, we need to leave behind those notions that it's just more energy and more agriculture. and rather look to more diversified sectors or more diversity within energy and agriculture. All right. Number 3, in terms of big themes affecting our economy, and that is greater applications of artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation. Now, this is not unique to Alberta. This is happening everywhere around the world. Every industry around the world is being affected by this. And practically every worker in every industry around the world is in one way or another being affected by greater applications of AI and robotics. And when we think of especially that term robotics or robot, there tends to be 2 human responses that come out of that. The first human response should be excitement. We should actually be quite excited about the possibilities, the potential problems we can now start to solve and address using big computational data power and machines that can learn using robotics and automation. But the other human response, maybe a little bit more common when we think of robots and robotics, the other human emotional response is absolute terror, because there is a lot of anxiety around robots displacing workers, eliminating a lot of jobs. A few years ago, the Conference Board of Canada had a report that suggested up to 40% of all jobs in Canada will be affected by robotics and automation. Now, affected can be positive and negative, but there's no question a lot of traditional jobs are going to be eliminated. And that has left some worry, some anxiety about what do we do with workers whose jobs no longer exist, especially some of those workers who maybe have lowest levels of skill or education. How do we deal with that? Well, when we think about all of the industries that are being affected by AI, robotics, and automation, it's no longer just manufacturing. That might have been true 30 years ago. But today it's really every industry. And the challenge for us in our labor market, the challenge is how do we learn to work alongside AI and robotics? I don't think there's any point in trying to prevent greater applications of AI and robotics in some attempt to save jobs and save workers' positions. I think rather we need to embrace it, but it does require of us a shift in mentality around working alongside AI and robotics. And here, especially when we think of post-secondary and training people for the labor market of the 21st century, here I believe the very most important attribute of workers is going to be flexibility and adaptability. When we think about the 20th century, most of us, generally, judging by the demographics of the room here, most of us received our education in the 20th century, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Back then, the proposition was pretty simple. You go to school for 4 years, post-secondary or a polytech, you get educated in a skill or some sort of information. Then you're released to the work world and you're expected to work for 40 years applying what you learned. Well, today that is no longer a sufficient way of looking at education and the labor market. If you're only equipped with some information in your head and now you're expected to apply that information, eventually, maybe already now, a robot will be able to do it faster and better and cheaper than you. The trick now, or the challenge for workers, is to be flexible and adaptable in how you apply your skills and competencies. Taking your skills and applying it in this opportunity over here, or create this opportunity over here, or maybe a brand new opportunity that doesn't even exist yet in a few years. Flexibility, adaptability, that will be paramount for workers. Working alongside AI and robotics, it will require of us a shift in our mentality around work and employment in the future. All right. Number 4, in terms of big themes affecting Alberta, and this is one where I always find the greatest level of disagreement or debate, particularly around what, if anything, we should do about it. And that is the growing disparity of income and opportunity that we are seeing between Canadians. Now, this income gap, sometimes they call it a measure of inequality as measured by the Gini coefficient. This is not unique to Canada. This has generally been happening around the OECD, the wealthy industrialized countries, for the last 30 years. Measures of income inequality have been rising. In some countries, like the United States, we are seeing record levels of income inequality. And now it's starting to give rise to some questionable, or some interesting anyway, political outcomes. In some countries like Brazil, we're seeing the rise of populism. Some countries like the United Kingdom, we're seeing pulling away from trade agreements and more isolationism. Even in the United States, we are seeing a greater sense of isolating itself from the rest of the world, trade barriers and tariff walls around the country, and in some cases, physical walls between it and Mexico. Now, all of these trends, these political trends towards more isolationism, I'm not the expert in that, but the experts do point, one of the factors that is driving this is measures of inequality, this income gap between the rich and the poor, and those who have opportunities and those who do not. One of the favorite books I read over the last 6 months or so, Stephen Harper's new book, where he talks about the rise of populism, and he addresses this income gap between people. He describes people in the wealthy countries, generally of two types. The first type he would describe as, or he labels, the anywheres. These are global citizens. These are people usually with high levels of education, high levels of wealth and income. They've got wonderful opportunities in their path. They are global citizens insofar as they can live, work, and play anywhere in the world. They are culturally comfortable in many different places. They are the anywheres. And in 2019, they are doing very well. However, Mr. Harper also describes another group of people he labels the somewheres. These are people who are rooted in a geographic community. It's not to say they're bad people, they're very good people. They just tend to have lower levels of education, lower levels of wealth and income, and certainly fewer opportunities. Many of them feel they are trapped in dead-end industries that are going nowhere. Their incomes are not keeping up with inflation. And in the 21st century, they are not doing well in the global economy. They feel trapped. And as a result, a lot of them are quite angry. And this is why you're starting to see the rise of populist leaders, because they feel the anywheres have been making all the rules all the time, and they are not working well for them. Now, here in Canada, we are not seeing the same level of income disparity. We're not seeing the rise of populism in the same way. However, we are seeing an income gap that continues to grow, like it is most other places. And I think in 2019, it's time Canadians, Albertans, start to talk about what do we do, if anything, about this income gap. One of the ideas that has been floated more and more these days, and I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing about it, economists love talking about it, and policymakers, and even a lot of the leaders in Silicon Valley have been championing the idea of a universal basic income. Now, it's a controversial idea. It's not new. In fact, the universal basic income, or a UBI, goes all the way back. Canada was one of the first countries to experiment with it in the early 1970s. And over the years, it's kind of ebbed and flowed a bit, but today more and more economists and leaders are talking about, do we need to think about a universal basic income? The idea around a UBI is pretty simple. Every citizen, every Canadian would be afforded a sum of money from government, a stipend. Not a lot of money, enough money basically to keep you alive. Food, shelter, clothing. And you could operate it like the GST rebate, whereas if your income rises to a certain level or higher, then your UBI would be whittled down and you wouldn't receive it. But basically, it would be moving away from all the means-tested income support that governments at all levels offer now. Over the last 80 years, governments in this country have been putting together a very complicated pile of income support, anti-poverty programs, old age security, guaranteed income supplement, all of these programs, very well intended. But in 2019, we have to ask ourselves, is this really the very best and most efficient way we can protect the most vulnerable in our society? Maybe there is a more efficient, more streamlined way of doing it. This is why economists are talking about a UBI. And it could be that, as relating back to theme number 3, as we are seeing more displacement of workers in our economy, especially at the lowest skill levels, due to robotics and automation, are we going to see an increase over the next couple of years, maybe an acceleration in the levels of income inequality. And what are we going to do about it? Now, I confess, I'm on the fence about a UBI. I'm not here to promote it or to criticize it. There are lots of criticisms you can make against a UBI. The most common one being, if we pay people to do nothing but sit around, we shouldn't be surprised if people do nothing but sit around. And does something like a UBI provide too easy an off-ramp off the freeway of life? You know, allowing young people especially the chance to sort of drop out and say, I'm not interested in school, I'm not interested in post-secondary, I don't know what I want to do, I'm just going to not even try and collect my universal basic income. I think, and most people would agree, that would be tragic if in fact we're giving people too easy a way out of this. On the other hand, the proponents of a UBI, they would say, well, in fact, if people's basic necessities of life, food, shelter, clothing, if they don't need to worry about those, the research shows, in fact, that people become quite ambitious and a lot of ability to find whatever training they need to integrate into the work world. And I have some sympathy for that idea too. If you are a homeless person living in any Canadian city today, and your big challenge on any given afternoon is, where am I going to sleep tonight? What food is going to go in my stomach or my child's stomach? If that is your reality, the last thing you're probably capable of doing that day is going down to the Polytechnic and finding some online resources. That's going to be beyond what you can manage. But if the basic necessities, food, shelter, clothing, are taken care of, you don't need to worry about that. Does it actually provide the base for people to become more resourceful? I don't know. I would love to see more long-term research on a universal basic income. But if it's this or if it's something else, I think 2019, it's time Canadians start to discuss the realities of growing income disparity and maybe figure out ways to address it before it becomes a bigger problem. And number 5, to wrap up, themes that matter, and that is simply the global economy in which we live, breathe, and operate. Canada, we know, we are a small to medium-sized global economy. Stacked up against other nation economies, Canada ranks roughly 10th or 11th. We're about the size of California. So we're not completely insignificant, but we're also not that large. And once you get down to a province the size of Alberta, now we're actually quite small. There's more people in the San Francisco Bay Area than there is in all of Alberta. And that leaves us vulnerable to what goes on in the global economy. We are price takers for everything we sell, everything we dig out of the soil, everything we chop down or grow, every service we export. We have no ability as a province to affect price. So that's fine that we're global players and we trade all over the world, but it does leave us vulnerable. And when you think about the things going on around the global economy in 2019, there are a lot of things swirling around us. And a lot of them leave us susceptible. Think about the trade war going on between our largest and our second largest trading partner, the United States and China. Nothing good can come of this. This trade war has already been slowing down global economic activity in 2019. And Canada is especially vulnerable because this is our largest and our second largest trading partners. And these two are not getting along nicely in the playground. A lot hangs in the balance for Canada, and everyone, I think, understands when push really comes to shove on this, we know how Canada is going to side. China knows this too, and China has been sending Canada some very unpleasant messages in the last several months. Basic message being, we're watching you, Canada, and we're not too thrilled with the way you're behaving. We know you need China as an export market much more than we need you. How about we slap on, to start, a canola ban? Let's see what you think of that. And I think we're naive to think that China would not have more retaliatory trade actions in mind if things, in fact, do not improve between the US and China, and Canada continues to side with the United States. When you think about the situation on the other side, or across the other pond, in the European Union, and what a mess the United Kingdom finds itself in, 3 years ago this month, voting to separate from the European Union, the Brexit. All they've been able to do in 3 years of negotiating is kick the can further down the road, extending now the deadline to October 31st of this year to come up with some agreement between trade and investment between it and the European Union. And I don't know, judging by their track record over the last 3 years, and now with the resignation of Theresa May, I really don't know if I'm very optimistic. I think our British brothers and sisters have a long, hot summer ahead of them. But this does create a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the European and British economies, which potentially affects financial markets, which then you can see how Canada can be caught in the crosswinds. And of course, our friend in the White House, any given day, who knows what he's going to tweet out. We know Canada has been in the crosshairs of his tweets in the past. More recently, it's been a little bit more Mexico. But, moving forward with the USMCA, the NAFTA Part 2, the agreement was signed by our Prime Minister and the two presidents last fall. It has not yet been ratified. And with the uncertainty around Donald Trump and what he's going to tweet, we don't know. There's no guarantee, in fact, that the USMCA is going to be ratified. We did see the U.S. lift the tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum a couple of weeks ago. That was positive. But we don't yet have a ratified deal in place. And that, again, leaves us a little bit vulnerable. So, to conclude, the one thing that matters a little bit, our forecast for Alberta's economy this year, very, very weak, if any, growth. My suspicion is we won't actually dip back into recession in a technical sense, but a lot of Albertans, it doesn't matter if technically if we're above or below zero, a lot of Albertans still, their reality is that we are still in recession. And even if we see a pipeline approval June 18, which I think would help a little bit, 2019 I'm anticipating to be a very discouraging year. And I hate giving that news. I wish I could sugarcoat this and say otherwise, but I think we can anticipate 2019 to be very, very weak, with only modest growth returning in 2020. But that is really just measuring the height of the child. These other themes, these 5 themes I mentioned, I believe have much more to say about the long-term health of Alberta's economy. Understanding those themes and how we might react to them, I think, will be more important for ensuring our long-term prosperity. So with that, it's a good thing I'm at the end of the presentation because my voice is cutting out on me. If we do have time for questions or comments of your own, I would love that, but I do want to respect your time and keep you on schedule.
Well, thank you. Very interesting and informative. I don't see anyone else right now, so of the 5 issues that you brought up, which do you peg as the most important?
The most important, almost without question at the moment, is the pipeline question. But number 2 is the 5th one that I mentioned, the global economy. The pipeline one, at least we have some control as Canadians over this one. And I think this is really what has left Albertans feeling frustrated. The inability to get this pipeline project going when this is something we can control as Canadians. The global economy probably has a larger impact on us, but we can't affect any of those things. No matter what we do, we have no influence on what happens in the Brexit, very little influence over the White House, and even less over Beijing. So the international situation is probably a longer-term worry, but the pipeline situation in the immediate future, between now and the end of summer, I think is the most significant one for Alberta.
But the exciting one to me is the pucks.
Yeah.
The CN idea that sounds like maybe the way of the future, and not have to worry about spills and whatnot.
Yeah.
We do have another question, Councillor Hanson.
Through the chair, I'm just curious, maybe in your travels, but if our pipeline capacity is fixed, how come we haven't seen more desire to increase the value of what is in the existing pipeline? And why are we not doing more upgrading in our province? And why are we just whining about not being able to build another cylindrical piece of steel as opposed to think a little more carefully about what we are actually putting in that steel.
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and it's one I guess I get asked all the time. Why don't we do more of the upgrading and refining here in Alberta? The short answer, at least at present, the economics of it really don't work. So no one wants to build a refinery in Alberta. They're very, very expensive to build, and there are refineries with capacity elsewhere. So the private sector, it's like, well, they don't want to spend money building one. They see it more economically advantageous to ship it to be refined elsewhere. That leaves the provincial government, which has no money and not a lot of appetite to take on big, big capital projects with very, very little return on it. So it's one of the, we're a little bit trapped. Everyone would like to see more refining and upgrading here, but the economics of it are against us. That all changes if it turns out we don't get any pipeline projects anymore at all, because what happens then is the price of our resource drops, as we've seen, that bubble, that differential. If our feedstock now becomes so low and the price of oil and hydrocarbons in this province is depressed, that then changes some of the economics of building more refineries here because the input cost would be much less. So it could change in the future, but at present there's just no money or appetite in the private sector or government to build a refinery.
Yeah, they tried that once and ran
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Okay, I had another question around the tech sector and clustering. So
Yeah.
what is it about clustering? What's the biggest benefit that brings? And, Rocky View, our core competitive advantage is probably cheap space, but
Yeah.
I know Cochrane and, of course, the city of Calgary are looking at cluster technology parks and things like that. But how can a county, maybe in your travels, how can a county get in on that technology bandwagon? What can we offer that would be synergistic with
Yeah.
cluster attempts that maybe are happening in southern Alberta?
Well, that's a great question too. It's probably one I'm not the most qualified to answer. How do you attract and retain these? I mean, those are questions economic development professionals kind of focus on. But the advantage of having a cluster is sort of takes on a momentum of its own. It becomes easier for companies to move where there's already a cluster because of the availability of skilled workers. And skilled workers will move to those centers because of the availability of jobs. So it really is one of these, chicken and egg things. Once you develop a critical mass like Waterloo or Vancouver or Silicon Valley, that's where the tech companies want to move. That's where people with tech skills want to be because of the opportunities. Calgary, this region, we're not quite there yet, but I do see us moving forward, developing more of that tech sector, which will help us in the future then attract even more tech companies and more workers.
So rising tide floats all boats,
Yeah.
thinking, right?
Yeah, but the only other thing I would mention on that is when, economic development officers, they would be better at this, but tax rates are one thing they'd look at, but tech companies look at a broad range of other things, including lifestyle.
Quality of life.
Yeah, those are really important. So I always caution people, don't look just at the tax base. That's one thing, the tax rate, but look at other things like quality of life as well.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
We have Deputy Reeve Schul.
I don't see any other questions, so I was just going to make a motion. But first, I'd like to thank you again. It was a very good presentation. And I'll go with option one, that council receive the presentation, Todd Hirsch, economic overview for information.
Thank you. Well, just before call the question, thank you very much. We enjoyed
You're very
it.
welcome.
And,
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think another day we'd have more questions. All in favor? That is carried. Anybody need a 10-minute break? 5? Okay, 5-minute break. go to agenda item D1. D. Good morning.
Morning, Reeve Velke, members of council, Steve Holzman, Transportation Services. Item D1 is an update to council on the current status of boundary roads throughout the county. Back in October of 2018, we were directed to review the condition of boundary roads throughout the county, and that was triggered specifically by a couple roads in Division 2 and Division 8. Both of those are unique in the sense that they're roads that were annexed by the City of Calgary in this case, but primarily have Rocky View residents on them. Staff went out, we met with all our bordering municipalities in person or on the phone. We discussed maintenance. Most of the discussions did revolve around joint bans, future build-outs, land purchases, synergies that we could do together. There was no specific maintenance concerns that came up at that time. We do have two maintenance agreements with the MD of Bighorn and Mountain View County, and those are kind of unique and specific because it's where you'd have a quarter of a mile on a 5-mile stretch of road. So instead of their grader coming to do a short portion, we do it for them, and they reciprocate the favor on those roads. So back to the two specific roads. We did talk with the City of Calgary. They did come out and address the concerns on those roads, and we found that they are in an acceptable condition after that. And we have talked to better understand their service levels, and we're confident that going forward, our means of communication, either telephone, email, or in writing, is sufficient so that they can respond. We've checked the two roads in particular, Township 250 and Division 2. We did notice this spring the only failure on that road was actually on the Rocky View portion. It was a frost failure, and we went out and repaired it, but the city portion was actually in very good shape. So that concludes my report, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Councillor McKeiler.
Thank you, through the chair. Specifically for Township Road 250, or actually maybe for the whole update here, they've said the two specific roads are going to be monitored. At what frequency or interval would that happen?
Through the chair to Councillor McKeiler, we would monitor Township 250 while we're there grading our portion. If we saw or felt there was a need, we would contact the city immediately at that time. And also Range Road 23 in Division 8. It's a pretty popular road, so we would do that as we're out doing regular maintenance or any other inspections. Picking up garbage, unfortunately, gets dumped on a lot of those roads, so we are out there quite frequent.
Perfect. My second question has to do with residents, county residents along that road, and I know that their experience has been they've called in and again, rightly so. I've heard the reply that those are City of Calgary roads. You need to call the city, but because they're really there are residents and it's the city road, do we have a mechanism in place that we can stick handle that on behalf of those residents? So if they do call in with a worry or concern, that we can actually take it with regards to managing and then going to the Calgary rather than pushing them off to the City of Calgary?
Through the chair to Councillor McKeiler, what would occur on those roads, and we did have in place prior, but we'll reinforce that, is when a concern is brought to our attention by a resident, hopefully we see it before that would come from our call center. It would go directly to the district manager for those roads in the city, and they would address them, and we would follow up.
Perfect, thank you.
No? I see no further questions, so if we get a motion. Deputy Reeve Schul.
Go with option 1, that the boundary road update report be received as information.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Appreciate it. All in favor? That is carried. We got 5 minutes. How would we do I1, the notice of motion? Either Deputy Reeve Schul or Councillor Gautreau can read it into the record. Councillor Gautreau.
Thank you. Whereas Rocky View County and Wheatland County share a common municipal border and share common interest in development along Highway 1 corridor. And as where development along Highway 1 corridor requires a long-term planning and intermunicipal collaboration between Rocky County and Wheatland County. As where Rocky County and Wheatland County would benefit from a joint area structure plan along Highway 1 corridor as outlined on the map titled Highway 1 Corridor ASP. Servicing of the area structure plan would be the developer-funded, and Rockview County and Wheatland County would share benefits of development within an area structure plan. Therefore, it be resolved that administration be directed to explore a joint development-funded area structure plan for the Highway 1 corridor between Rockview County and Wheatland County, and that administration be directed to return to council with a report on a feasibility of an area structure plan and potential expenses and revenue sharing models between the two municipalities.
And thank you. Do we have anyone here for D3? If we could hear that one, we'll go ahead with D3, and I think that'll close out till public hearing.
Good morning, Mr. Reeve and Council. D3 is in respect of tax relief due to a fire loss for roll number 06313002. Administration has received a written request from the ratepayer for property tax relief due to a fire in 2018. The county's assessment department inspected the property and has provided an estimate of municipal and emergency taxes that council may consider for cancellation. Should council approve the tax cancellation in response to the above noted request, the 2018 municipal and emergency taxes for the subject property would be adjusted on the tax account or by written request refunded to the property owner. Confirmation has been received that there is no insurance coverage for property taxes. The subject property was not under investigation since the fire occurrence, and the file is now closed. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Deputy Reeve Schul.
I will go with option 1, that 2018 municipal emergency tax cancellation request for roll 06313002 due to the fire damage in amount of $1,418.48 be approved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? You guys are too quick this morning here. Just in advance of the public hearings, I'll read a little statement that I have to make. I think that'd be okay right now, right? Okay. I'm Greg Belke, the chair. Just a general reminder, you can, for a public hearing, you can register your name on the speakers list that's located just outside of council. I'll remind folks that this meeting is live streamed to the internet. Clearly state your full name when you come forward. For the record, before you speak, please turn off all cell phones or turn them to silent mode. The public hearing process will be followed in accordance with our procedural bylaw. Once the public hearing is open, administration will provide a report to introduce the proposed bylaw. The applicant will then be provided with 20 minutes to speak to their application. I will then call upon those persons who wish to speak in support of the application, followed by those who wish to speak in opposition. Number 1, if you're speaking on behalf of yourself, you may have a maximum of 5 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of the group, you have a maximum of 10. I will then invite the applicant to speak for a maximum of 10 minutes to rebut the points raised in opposition only. Once the public hearing is closed, council will discuss and debate the merits of the application and vote accordingly. I believe we're at 10 o'clock. We'll call the first, ask for the first C1 for a motion to open the hearing. Deputy Reeve Schul.
I'll make a motion to open public hearing C2.
All in favor? And that is carried. Could we get the report, please?
Morning, Reef. Morning, Council. Item C2 is located in Division 4, approximately 5 kilometers southwest of the hamlet of Langdon. Surrounding area is mainly agricultural land, and a portion of land was designated to agriculture holding and farmstead back in the 90s. Purpose of this application is to designate a portion of the subject land, approximately 20 acres in size, to agriculture holding to facilitate future berry farm or U-pick operations. The application was assessed in accordance with the county plan policy for new and distinct agriculture operations and is in compliance with the policies. There are no technical constraints, and all technical matters will be assessed at the subdivision stage. Application was circulated to 19 adjacent landowners, and the applicant provided 3 letters in support of the applications. This concludes my presentations, and we're here to answer any questions.
Is there something we can do? Like, we're having a lot of trouble hearing this. And I checked with others to see, so it's not just me going deaf. The audio seems a little off this morning anyway, and very distant. So, you're done your report?
I can repeat it if need be. Yeah.
Okay. Nope, we'll call on the applicant to come forward then and tell us about their project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Council, and Council staff. We appreciate your consideration of our application. I look forward to any questions. Yeah, basically we're applying for redesignation in our subject property and
Okay, we're going to just take a couple minutes and try to get this fixed.
Okay.
We're having a real struggle hearing you, and I think the audience is too. I see. So sorry about that, but we will just take a little break. could start all over again, we'll give you a clean slate from the first, right off the bat.
My name is Jay Morris. I'm the owner with my wife on the property. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Council, and Council staff. We appreciate your assistance and consideration in our application. I look forward to any questions after my brief presentation. Basically, we're looking to redesignate a portion of our property from Ranch and Farm District to Agriculture Holdings for a berry farm and U-Pick. We currently have a horse boarding facility there, as well as English riding and training. And we just want to diversify a bit on our property to provide more agriculture involvement in our community.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the applicant or administration? Seeing none. Thank you. You can take your seat. We'll now call on those in favor. Anyone in favor like to come forward? There is no one on the list and no responses from the circulation, so I'll ask two more times. Anyone in favor like to come forward? Anyone in support come forward? Seeing none, we'll ask for those in opposition, and again, no one was on the list and no one was or responded to the circulation. Anyone in opposition like to come forward? Come forward if you're in opposition, please. And seeing no one, no need for rebuttal. Councillor's wish.
I will go to, first of all, I just want to make a quick comment that the presentation in our package was fantastic. It's really explained everything really well. Sure, it makes life much simpler for me. So I would like to go, I got to close the hearing here first. Motion to close. Thanks.
All in favor? All in favor. And now, Deputy Reeve Schul.
Okay, now I will go with the motion. Motion one, that the bylaw C7883 2019 be given for, first reading.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Councillor McKeiler.
Thank you. I'd like to move that bylaw C7883-2019 be given second reading.
Second reading, all in favor? That is carried. Councillor Hen.
Move that bylaw C-7883-2019 be considered for third reading.
Consideration of third, all in favor? That is carried. And Councillor Wright, did you vote? Oh, okay. And Deputy Reeve Schul.
Okay, I'll go with motion 4 that bylaw C7883 2019 be given third and final reading.
Third reading, all in favor? That is carried, and your application has been approved. We will go to C3. And that is Division, where is it? 2. Councillor McKeiler.
Division 5.
Division 5? Oh, I'm one ahead. Councillor Gautreau.
Thank you. Move to open C3.
Move to open, all in favor? And that is carried. Do I need to go through this again? Welcome. I hope you registered your name on the speakers list. I will remind that this meeting is live streamed. Please clearly state your full name for the record before you speak. Please turn cell phones off or to silent mode. The public hearing process will be followed in accordance with our procedural bylaw. Once the public hearing is open, administration will provide a report to introduce the proposed bylaw. The applicant will then be provided 20 minutes to speak to their application. I will then call upon those persons who wish to speak in support of the application, followed by those who wish to speak in opposition. If you're speaking on the behalf of yourself, you have 5 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of a group, you have 10. I will then invite the applicant to speak for a maximum of 10 minutes to rebut the points raised in opposition. Once the public hearing is closed, Council will discuss and debate the merits of the application and vote accordingly. Could we get the staff report, please? Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and Council member. My name is Xin Deng, Municipal Planner with Planning and Development Services. The subject land is located south of Highway 564 and east of Highway 791. The purpose of this application is to redesk a portion of the land from a Weirs district to a Hamlet Residential 4 district and the Business, Leisure and Recreation district, in order to facilitate residential development and the golf course business within the adopted fairways at the Delacorte conceptual scheme. This is a fairways Delacorte conceptual scheme that was approved by council in December last year. At the time, plan proposed to create 480 residential condominium units, which will be located around this existing golf course. The residential development will be serviced by piped water. Wastewater and stormwater will be collected, treated, and reused for golf course irrigation. The application was evaluated in accordance with applicable policies. The proposal meets the intensification and the infill development policies within the interim growth plan. The proposal complies with the golf course business air policy, golf course residential air policy, and the Hamlet expansion air 1 policy within the Delacorte community air structure plan. And the proposal is also consistent with the adopted fairways at the Delacorte conceptual schemes. The surrounding land use include the residential development to the north, small agriculture around this subject land, and the small hamlets business and the small-scale hamlets industry to the west. There are no geotechnical concerns on the subject land, and the application was circulated to 75 landowners in the areas, and no letter was received. So conclusion, the proposal meets interim growth plan, the Delacorte community air structure plan, and the fairways Delacorte conceptual scheme. Thank you. And here's the video. Video was taken along the Highway 791. Facing north, you see this is the Highway 564. This is a Highway 791. Pending to east, you start to see the corner of this golf course. Continue move south, you start see this clubhouse, that's the existing clubhouse. This is the Highway 791. According to the adopted conceptual scheme, this portion of land, this portion of the road will be upgraded to a paved standard. Pending to the west, there's some small agriculture and residential development. And now move back to the north. This is a Highway 791. You see the intersection with the Highway 564. That's close my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now ask the applicant to come forward. State your name for the record, please, and tell us about your project.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, my name is Bob Westcott. I'm a land use planner with Westcott Consulting Group. I'm here on behalf of McIntosh Farms, the registered owner of the lands and the applicant in this particular matter. You have before you a request for a redesignation for the portion of the McIntosh lands that would envision the expansion of the golf course facilities, as well as the introduction of hamlet residential development into the area. As staff has pointed out, the application that you have before you was examined in respect to many of the policies that you have in place and have had in place for quite some time. When we speak of the intensification and infill growth strategy, it was envisioned that areas like Delacorte would in fact grow, accompanied with the construction installation of the appropriate infrastructure. We're at a point now where the infrastructure is to be provided. Therefore, we'd like to follow the policies that the county has espoused in that particular plan. The other is that the county staff prepared the Delacorte area structure plan in 2005. That area structure plan was well received by the community, and to this day has broad support by the community at large. Now, for a plan to remain, I guess, valid or reflective over a 15, 20-year period is to say something to the plan itself. We know that there's not complete unanimity in the Delacour Area Structure Plan, but it does have broad support. In December, we presented a conceptual plan to Council. That conceptual plan envisioned the application that we have before you today. What we view this application as the natural extension of the planning policies that the county has put in place, and we are attempting to follow that. We're doing so with a very collaborative approach. We're attempting to address all concerns and gain consensus as we go along. When we look at the comments from staff and many of the referrals from the relevant agencies, it's apparent that there are no objections to the concept as presented. And it's important to note that even during the presentation of the conceptual plan, that was the same. And we tried to do that as a reflection of our collaborative approach to development. We try and work closely with the community. Again, we can't say that we have consensus. We don't have unanimity, but maybe that's unrealistic to expect that we can have unanimity. The application envisions that there will be a series of residential units. Now they vary. Some of them are larger single family down to smaller villas. Again, the kinds of housing that was envisioned and identified in the Delacour Area Structure Plan. So again, we're trying to align very closely with the plan itself. The next piece was the golf course. Now, when the golf course was initially constructed, there were plans for an expansion in providing facilities in support of the golf course. So part of our application today is requesting that some of the lands be rezoned to business, leisure, and recreation district so that we can include a golf training facility as well as a multi-purpose building to help with functions at the golf course. The process that we followed, again, was closely aligned with the county policy. Staff has indicated in the report that we've aligned with the conceptual plan. We've aligned with your infill policies. We've aligned with the Delacour Area Structure Plan. We've attempted to stay as close to the direction and the consensus of the community as we possibly can. So what we're asking is if you'd grant redesignation of the land so that we can move forward and go forward with an application for subdivision to follow. Be pleased to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So far, so good. I think you're going to get off lucky.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now call on those that are in favor. I have one on the list, Clinton Cornelius. You'd come forward, please.
Mr. Chairman and members of the council, my name is Clinton Cornelius, and I live just east, bordering the golf course there, and my land borders the golf course. And I have lived there since 1993, even before the land was bought by Doug McIntosh, and also the golf course, the beginning of the golf course. And I've watched the expansion and the development, the golf course. And it has been, I think, an improvement to the whole area of Delacour. And I've talked to people that have golfed there, and they said it's a very well-operated golf course, and they like it very much. And so, being a neighbor and watching it, and also I have been in constant conversations with the owner, Doug McIntosh, and he has always informed me of what things are happening. And we've had good relationship. And I have only seen good things with the golf course, and I think even now their plan to expand, I think it will also be an improvement to the area. I see Calgary is growing, and you can't stop growth, and so I think it could be a good thing for the area. And it's in a good location right along a highway that I hope and plan that they divide that highway. As a farmer, it is very difficult to even get onto the Highway 564 because it is, but that's not because of the golf course. It's basically because it's a handy road to get from Calgary east. So I would say I am in favor of the expansion.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
I had one question, sir.
Mr. Cornelius, we do have a question for you.
Through the chair, are you a golfer?
No, I'm not.
And you still support this?
I do bury a lot of golf balls, though.
Oh, okay. Any revenue streams from lost balls on your property?
Yes, a lot of it end up on there, but no problem.
All right.
I've never seen them grow.
Oh, thank you.
Is that the question?
That was it. Thank you.
That was
Okay.
It's
Thank
scary
you.
coming up here, so I appreciate
Any
you,
other questions?
I see none. Thank you. I'll ask again, anyone in favor like to come forward? Is there anyone in favor would like to come forward and speak? Anyone in favor? Seeing none, we'll go to those in opposition. And I have one, and sorry if I mispronounce your name, you can straighten it out when you get here, is Fight? Mr. Fight. If you'd pronounce your name for me, thank you, for council.
Good morning, the members of council. My name is Detlef Feicht, and I live in Delacour, west of the golf course. And I like to take the opportunity to voice my concern about this proposed bylaw. In regards of the Range Road 280 South, the road conditions and the dust issues has never been addressed since the golf course was opened in 2003. And now even more and heavier construction traffic will be added. I'm asking to fix the road issues first before passing this bylaw. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Seeing none, there's no one else on the list, so I'll ask again. Anyone would like to come in opposition? Anyone in opposition, please come forward. And the applicant has the opportunity to rebut, if you'd like to what you've heard in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll indeed be brief. I certainly would like to acknowledge Mr. Fife's concerns about the dust. First of all, that's a secondary road. It's Secondary Road 791. The development that we're proposing is actually a phased development. Phase 1 is over on the east side of the property, and it will have direct access onto Highway 564, which is the township road. 564, our access will be directly onto that secondary highway. It's envisioned in future phases that there will be an access point off 791, which would be the road that Mr. Feist is concerned about. As part of the conceptual plan, we have undertaken to complete improvements on secondary 791 to county standards at the time of subdivision of that area along the west side of the development that would be accessing that road. So we can acknowledge that that he may have some concerns with respect to the the status of the road. At the present time, it's a secondary road. If and when development does occur on that side, we have an undertaking through the development agreement process to improve that road to a paved standard to the satisfaction of the county.
Thank you. Councillor Kissel.
Through the Reeve, just understanding your timeline, what are you looking at for phase one as a timeline?
Through the chair, I guess it's contingent on preparation of the application for subdivision. We have attempted to be extremely collaborative in that approach, so we would be ensuring that we've tried to address all of the concerns before presenting an application for subdivision back to the county. So it would be contingent on how successful we are with that. But as soon as we have a subdivision approval, then it would be our intent to move forward with development of phase one.
And what is your estimation of time to complete phase one?
With market conditions,
yeah.
I'd be very hesitant, and I'm not trying to be evasive. I'd just be very, very hesitant to suggest any times. I really don't know. I'm sorry.
That's a fair answer. No, thank you.
Councillor Hanson.
Through the chair, and your comment about 791, would most of the traffic be heading north to 564 from the west side of the development, or would it be heading south?
Through the chair, if you're relating to development that would be generated from this development, in the traffic impact assessment that was completed by our traffic consultant, it identified that there would be approximately a 70-30 split, 70 going north, 30 going south. That was based on the traffic counts and monitoring of the traffic as it presently exists. Most of the traffic that attends the golf course at the present time comes from the north, from 564.
Okay, so when earlier you mentioned that at further subdivision stage, it would be in part of the conditions to pave 791, were you talking about the entire length of your development or the portion north of the main entrance?
I guess through the chair, that is something that we'd have to discuss with the county staff, the administration, at the time of the application for subdivision. The discussions that we've had with Alberta Transportation was that we would pave from the intersection of 564 and 791 to the approach to the access rate just about there. Yes, we would pave that portion of the road. At least that's the discussion now. But again, this is solely up to the county's discretion. You guys will determine what we pave and what we don't pave.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Gautreau.
Thank you, through the chair. I know this probably is more for administration, and I know this is a little bit to do with subdivision, so hopefully the chair gives me a little bit of leeway, because I did have my concerns when we talked about the Delacour concept scheme on this. And I know that this is a phased approach or a phased subdivision. However, I'm looking at AT's comments here that they want 791 paved, but it doesn't really say when in through here. So I guess part of my comment would be, can it be done at any phase, or does it have to be done like on phase 2 or phase 3, or can this be moved ahead? So I guess the paving can be moved ahead at phase 1.
Through the chair to Councillor Gautreau. So in regards to paving of 791, it would be the county's expectation through conditions of subdivision to require that paving once that access point onto 791 is created. So as per the map on the screen, that appears to be phase 2. So should the application move into phase 2 with an access point onto 791, that would trigger the need for a paving.
Okay, and then I remember there was an intersection upgrade as well. What phase does that go into?
To the chair, so we'd monitor that intersection as a part of conditions of subdivision. So even with phase 1, we'd ask them to have a look at that to see if their phase 1 triggers something. Should it not, then at phase 2, we'd look again to see if the additional traffic from phase 2 would trigger. So it's a phase-by-phase approach, and they'd look at it as they make application for their phases.
Okay, and just asking a little bit more leniency from the chair. If when this comes back to subdivision, could we move that pave standard to the front? Like, can we move it to, it has to be done at phase 1 stage on the 791 pavement?
To the chair, to Councillor Goutreau, the subdivision authority can impose the conditions that it deems that are appropriate, but from a technical and a rational perspective, it may or may not be warranted. So a TIA would tell us, how many trips are going down that roadway, based on that 70-30 split the applicant has spoken about. It would be really based on a technical sort of analysis and number of vehicles traveling down that roadway. But just from a first look at this, my opinion would be that that requirement would be likely a phase 2 condition.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Any more questions of administration? Seeing none, Councillor Gautreau, Councillor's wish.
I move to close.
Close the hearing. All in favor? That is carried, and we'll go to Councillor Gautreau.
Thank you. Well, people have heard my concerns that the 791 should be paved. It fits everything. It fits the Delacour ASP back in 2005, and I can say, it has this ASP has stood the turn of time. So I'd like to move option 1, motion 1, that bylaw C7891 2019 be given first reading.
Just before we call that question, I'd like to ask Mr. Bards, do we give 2 readings and then send this to the Growth Management Board?
Through the chair to Reeve Balke, we're not amending the area structure plan in this, and it's really carrying out the area structure plan, which has been grandfathered under the interim growth plan. So my answer is no, you don't have to.
Good, good. Thank you. We'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. And Councillor McCuller.
Thank you. I'll move that bylaw C7891 2019 be given second reading.
Second reading. All in favor? That is carried. Councillor Henn.
Move that bylaw C-7891-2019 be considered for third reading.
Consideration of third. All in favor? That is carried. And Councillor Gautreau.
Thank you. That bylaw C7891 2019 be given third and final reading.
Thank you. Third reading. All in favor? That is carried, and your application has been approved. Anybody need a break? Seeing not. We'll go to item D5. Okay, let's go to D4 then.
There should be view, full screen. There you go. Hi, good morning, Council. My name is Stefan Kuntz. I'll be presenting item D4 today on behalf of administration and in conjunction with my counterpart, Nazreen Ali. So the purpose of today's item is to consider accepting a number of documents for information. We have 2 intermunicipal collaboration frameworks and 2 intermunicipal development plans for you today. These are with our municipal neighbors, the MD of Bighorn and Mountain View County. So here, just so we're aware of the area, Bighorn is obviously located to the west of Rocky View, and Mountain View County is to the north. Just a quick summary of what these documents are. An intermunicipal collaboration framework, or an ICF, identifies what and how municipal services are delivered between 2 adjacent municipalities. And an intermunicipal development plan, or an IDP, addresses planning and development on lands adjacent to that municipal boundary. So it's a quick summary of the steps that we've undertaken to date. We've been working with our municipal partners for 12